When I was 6 years old, I started waking up in the middle of the night to something I couldn't explain. At first, it was little things, like the feeling of being watched, or the sense that my room wasn't quite the same after the lights went out. I'd open my eyes and there he was. A man. He stood completely still in the far corner of my room, always the same corner. He wore a long dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. I could never see his eyes. The first night, I screamed so loud that my parents rushed in. I pointed at the corner, crying, begging them to see what I saw. But when they turned on the light, he was gone. They told me it was just a nightmare, but it didn't feel like one. Night after night, he came back. Sometimes I'd wake up and see him already standing there. Other times, I'd roll over and feel my chest tighten before I even opened my eyes, like I knew he was there. I stopped telling my parents because they never believed me. They thought I had an overactive imagination, but it wasn't my imagination. I know that now. One night, I woke up and the corner was empty. For the first time in weeks, I felt relief. I remember thinking, maybe it's finally over. That's when I felt it, breathing, right next to me. I turned my head slowly, and he wasn't in the corner anymore. He was leaning over me, so close that if I reached out, I could have touched the brim of his hat. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare as his face, pale and hollow, came into view. The next thing I remember is waking up the next morning, drenched in sweat, my arms covered in long, thin scratches that I couldn't explain. My parents brushed it off. But to this day, I still wake up at night sometimes and check that same corner of the room. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see the shadow of his hat. I was 9 years old when I first heard it. It was a normal night. I had gone to bed late after reading comics under the blanket with a flashlight. My toys were scattered all over the floor, like they always were, and I remember being too lazy to pick them up. The house was quiet. My parents were down the hall, and my younger sister was already asleep in the next room. I started drifting off, half asleep, when I heard it. A whisper, clear as day. It said my name. Daniel. I froze. My eyes shot open, and I held my breath. At first, I thought maybe I was dreaming. But then it came again. Softer this time, longer, coming from directly underneath my bed. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. Instead, I pulled the blanket over my head, trembling, and tried to convince myself it was my imagination. But the whisper didn't stop. It grew more playful, repeating my name, sometimes dragging it out. Daniel. Other times, almost giggling. I couldn't move. I couldn't even cry out for my parents. I stayed like that, paralyzed, until I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion. The next morning, sunlight poured through my window, and for a moment I felt safe. I finally worked up the courage to look under the bed. Nothing, just my toys scattered around. But later that day, when I came home from school, I found something lying on my bed, a folded piece of paper. I opened it with shaking hands. Written in messy, childlike handwriting were 4 words. Thanks for playing with me. When I was 8, my family moved to a small house near the edge of the woods. It was the kind of place where the nights were silent, and the trees seemed to watch you from the dark. At first, I hated it. I missed my old neighborhood, my old friends. That changed when I met him. He was a boy about my age, who always seemed to be waiting near the tree line when I went outside to play. He had pale skin, messy dark hair, and he never told me much about himself. But we played almost every afternoon, hide and seek, tag, exploring the woods. I never asked where he lived. He always just appeared. One day, my mom looked out the kitchen window and saw me talking and laughing at the edge of the yard. When I came inside, she asked who I'd been playing with. I told her about my friend. Her face went pale. "Sweetie," she said, "there was no one out there." "You were by yourself," I argued, upset that she didn't believe me. I even described him in detail, the way his voice sounded, the games we played. She just shook her head. The next day, I went back to the woods, calling his name. But he didn't come. I searched deeper and deeper until I found a small clearing. At the center of it was a wooden cross, half buried in the dirt. Carved into it was a single name, the same name my friend had told me. I didn't understand what it meant back then. But years later, when I thought back on it, I realized the truth. I had been playing with someone who wasn't alive. When I was around 7 years old, I had an old wooden closet in my bedroom. It didn't have a lock, and the door never closed all the way. At night, I hated it. That little crack of darkness staring at me while I tried to sleep. One night, I woke up to the sound of the door creaking. Slow, long, drawn out. The closet door had opened wider. I told myself it was just the wind, but there was no draft in my room. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the blanket over my head. But then I heard it, the sound of faint breathing coming from inside. Every instinct told me to run, but I stayed frozen in bed until morning. When the sun rose, the closet was closed again. I tried telling my parents, but of course they didn't believe me. This went on for weeks. Some nights the door was just cracked wider. Other nights, I swore I saw something move inside, a shadow shifting in the darkness. One night, I finally gathered enough courage to get out of bed. I tiptoed across the room and pushed the closet door shut as hard as I could. The next morning, I woke up, and the closet was wide open. But this time, on the inside of the door, scratched into the wood, were the words, "Don't close it again." When I was a kid, my bed faced a large window that looked out onto our backyard. At night, with no curtains, all I could see was the black glass reflecting my room. One winter evening, I woke up thirsty and rolled over toward the window. That's when I saw it, a face, pressed against the glass. Its skin was pale, its eyes wide and unblinking, and it was smiling at me. At first, I thought it had to be a trick of the light, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. I screamed for my dad, and when he came running into the room, the window was empty. He told me it was a dream and to go back to sleep. But I know what I saw. A few weeks later, during a snowstorm, I woke up again and glanced at the window. There were fresh handprints on the outside glass. 5 long, bony fingers. The snow was falling heavily that night, but there were no footprints in the snow beneath the window. Only the prints of those hands, pressed against the glass.